Debí tirar más fotos de cuando te tuve. Hello all. So, throughout this month, I plan on making recordings pertaining to topics involving IMVU and 3D overall. I have seen a few posts online commenting on how the month is the first perfect 4 week February we've had in a while. So why not at least try to do something special with that nifty piece of information in mind? Now, this might bleed into the next month or might not even see the end of this month. So let's not get too excited or too tuned out over anything. If I do need to make a tutorial, of course, it would certainly happen, just maybe not on a Tuesday. So last week's video was the first in this chat about 3D series. You can go check it out if you're interested. It was inspired partly by a video by Animation Outrage that talked about the state of 3D related content on YouTube in general. In the video, he rightfully pointed out that the bulk of 3D related content on YouTube is mostly tutorials. If I were to make an uninformed guess at what the ratio of tutorials to actual 3D based content was on YouTube, I'd argue that it's at least something like 10 to 1. So inspired by that video, I have been working on another animated short film, which would be my fourth publicly released one. The process so far has been fun. I only hope that all the fun I'm having with making it translates into work that is appreciated beyond the technicalities of it all. So as for when this project will be released, I do have a February date in mind, but depending on how much my schedule turns out and real life doesn't pull any more surprises like the tooth drama I've got going on now, in case you've noticed from how different my speech is, it may or may not be this month. Now, let's get to the actual meat of today's discussion. IMVU versus Second Life. So I've had this topic sitting in my archives for quite some time now. I've also had a couple of requests through the years asking me to cover this specific topic. So before I began working on this video, I ran a bit of a cursory search for related content on YouTube. Shockingly, content on this specific topic is rather scarce. So here's my input on this ever-present discussion. So I have this set up in my archives as a series because, as you can imagine, there are many aspects to draw comparisons between the two platforms. In this recording specifically, I'll be comparing the overall feel of both platforms and their respective content creation processes. So in terms of feel, what do I even mean? Basically, how fun the platforms are to be on, because these are primarily recreational platforms at the end of the day. Now, we are watching, I assume, get the gist of how both of these platforms work to an extent. So it's important to note that at this point, everything that I am saying is opinion-based, okay? With IMVU, we have these like cutie patootie style avatars that once had these massive heads, and they wore the worst possible grades of pixel clothing. But that changed over the years, courtesy of many talented creators on IMVU. But said creations wouldn't have seen the light of day hadn't there been audiences ready to participate in the commerce of it all. The platform's limitations, however, as I mentioned in my IMVU should implement these features video from last year, include the absence of workable rooms, of course, questionable base avatar topology for whatever reason, and the skeletal framework, the occasional puzzling corporate level decision, like the creator royalty scandal of last year, as well as a few others, but they can't really come to mind right now. But Second Life, on the other hand, has it all. Dare I say a bit too much? Like you can walk, run, and fly with or without clothes on your perfectly symmetrical avatars with better than average topology in Second Life. But therein, ironically, lies what could be seen as its own limitation. Hear me out. I never really understood why a certain subset of people online, myself included, weren't exactly hyped over that kind of atmosphere until Inzoi became a thing. So much like Inzoi, Second Life feels a lot like it tries hard to replicate real life. There are countless instances where I've seen pictures I thought were of real people, only to find out that they were Second Life pictures taken in something like Black Dragon, for instance. But the communal obsession over realness and details gives the platform this kind of creepypasta finish to it. By the way, I'm just learning of that phrase, creepypasta, so if I'm using it wrongly, I apologize. The other popular phrase I think I've seen thrown around in such instances is uncanny valley. But basically, you get the idea. Second Life aims to be something it can't ever truly become. That being a simulation of real life. Adding to this, because most characters aim for realism, you can imagine that they take a while to load. That can even cause lag on your PC. So Second Life's answer to this is a feature called Show Friends Only, which mostly addresses the problem, even though rendering or resing one or two fully decked out avatars alone can be a bit of a task on your laptop or PC. However, if the point of this game is socialization, isn't that option sort of counterintuitive? Second Life isn't exactly comparable to like these AAA titles with human-like characters like the Grand Theft Auto games, whose characters look realistic enough to warrant the same uncanny valley description, but they are so action-packed that the average consumer barely cares what their characters look like. So in instances where we're getting uncanny valley characters in the likes of GTA, we're getting so much action that we don't even care what the characters look like. The characters could have no faces for all we care when it comes to GTA. But Second Life doesn't have the kind of action that can compensate for that. Second Life, on the other hand, is basically IMVU in terms of action level. Aside from the fact that you can walk, run, and fly, of course, you're going to have to click on, for example, like a chair, then select a sit action or a lie down action or something like that. And since these actions aren't created by one source, the quality varies vastly. Some chairs can give you lifelike sitting and, lying actions, while others are basically still poses. I love the open world structure of Second Life, of course. I mean, I play The Sims 3 as opposed to The Sims 4 or any other Sims game mainly because of this open world feature. The open world structure quickly loses its appeal when there's very little to explore beyond abandoned mansions, stores filled to the brim with things that aren't your style or definitely not within your budget. Then you have clubs with all these prop dancers. Everywhere is just reeking with this kind of overall dread and gloom. Another point of contention in this light for me is, personally, I feel such games are optimized better, and by such games I mean the likes of GTA, than Second Life, because I've played GTA on at least a few potato laptops, but Second Life, in my experience, can be unpredictable even on sturdier laptops. So who then kind of wins this feel round? As I said, these platforms are largely for recreational purposes. If I'm constantly checking my fans or compromising on performance settings to get only a fraction of the desired quality, then I'll have to admit that that isn't exactly fun. On the other hand, if I don't have to constantly check my fans and can even play on a phone when I'm stuck in traffic and have the battery life to waste, I'd say that's a bit more fun than the alternatives. But only by a bit though, only by a bit. So yes, IMVU is the more fun platform. Now, that might come as a shock to you, but it's ultimately been my experience. Overall, IMVU is more lightweight and steers clear of anything that brings it too close to the uncanny valley Second Life practically dwells in at this point. Like Second Life, again, in my experience, can feel a lot less like a game meets chat platform and more like an obligation. I'm constantly checking both my laptop and real life fans to prevent heat. I crank down my settings so that it works fine enough just for everything to end up looking pale, pasty, dull, and uninviting. Then I try to explore and, fulfill the game's purpose of meeting new people. But they're all ghosts since everyone's complexity is higher than your settings can tolerate, or my settings can tolerate, because some people play on ultra. So I sometimes get curious and render a character only for them to end up looking so simple, yet my laptop's fan speed is triple in speed. So basically, I'm just there to create when I'm curious enough to see what my idea would look like on an SL avatar. Anything outside that can feel rather exhausting, to be honest. And as a matter of fact, I uninstalled Firestorm, which is like supposed to be the most optimized viewer out there frequently, to tell you just how much of a burden Second Life can feel sometimes for me. Okay? Now, I know that there are many people who, based on these grounds, will obviously pick Second Life, but those people know the settings that they play Second Life on. I've played Second Life on proper PCs. I've played it on proper laptops. I still get similar experiences. So you know what's best for you. Now let's move to the second point of discussion in this recording, and that's the content creation process. For IMVU, it bears mentioning that before now, creators only needed to buy their usernames and they'd have access to create modes in perpetuity. However, in 2012, IMVU grandfathered this batch of creators, and the rest would have to pay at least $10 a month for the VIP program to unlock create mode. Now, of course, your $10 a month doesn't give you access to infinite uploads. Per month, you are awarded with at least 5,000 credits, which, depending on your tier, can afford you about 10 items uploaded to your shop. Then your tier grows basically the more you create and how frequently you create these days. Before now, however, tier was one of those great mysteries that only a few creators were able to get a good bearing on. IMVU has 11 tiers, with 0 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. In terms of the creation process itself, it is fun, evidenced by the dozens of videos of me making random sweatshirts and whatnot on this very channel. So you have the option of either deriving from an existing mesh in the shop, if you want to change maybe its color, normal map, or other related texture, or you can import your own rigged or unrigged mesh into the platform by deriving from one of IMVU's base derivable products. Yes, everything is effectively derived from something on IMVU. That's how IMVU works. In terms of meshing specifically for IMVU, some of the main drawbacks are that the default IMVU bodies don't have symmetrical armatures, and that can be a pain to work with, especially during the weight pacing process. Then your file sizes are capped at 3 megabytes for some products and 2 megabytes for others. You have a max texture resolution of 512 square pixels in 2026, but we move on. So you have to make multiple materials most of the time just so your products can have a baseline level of quality. Then lights are represented with bones for whatever reason, but that's not really an issue. There are, other small issues when it comes to creating with IMVU, but overall, the process for me has been enjoyable. It really went uphill, I'll admit, after they launched IMVU Studio and introduced other texture slots for normal, shine, emission, and so on. It's also worth noting that the IMVU shader supports double-sided materials, which is a huge time saver because the front and back faces become visible in IMVU with just one click. Now, let's talk about creating on Second Life. So unlike IMVU, The ability to create isn't locked behind a monthly subscription, so there's a win there. As a matter of fact, it can technically be of no cost to you if you've been spared a handful of lindens by your colleagues already. So reasonable mesh uploads on Second Life cost about $12 linden. Texture uploads are $10 linden per image under 1K resolution, and then $50 linden per image above 1K resolution and up to 2K resolution. So you have 8 times the texture resolution with Second Life than you do with IMVU. So that's another win depending on how you look at it. And of course, if we're calling $250 linden 1 USD, then you're spending a lot less than you would making one item for Second Life than you would be for IMVU as a first-time creator. So in terms of drawbacks with creating on Second Life, they are mostly not tied directly to the creating process itself, but more so to the commercial aspect of it, which can be a topic discussed in another recording. So let me know if you'd be interested in a comparison on that front. Also, mesh uploads in Second Life do not support double-sided materials. So whatever mesh you've made, right, that'll need a backside that you'll need to solidify it before exporting it to Second Life. There's also no derivation chain like there is in IMVU, but full permission mesh uploads exist, which are items that allow you to modify the item as desired, but without a direct link to the original product. So that is like you've bought a copy of the product and you can do whatever you want with it. So these two pipelines, dev chain and full perm, they sound similar, but the difference is that on the dev chain in IMVU, every creator on the chain, including IMVU, earns from the sale of the final product. Whereas with full perm on Second Life, only the seller of that final product earns something. Based on the content creation process alone, my winner is still IMVU. Why? Well, we're basically replicating the process on both platforms. And the only difference here is that one of the platforms in question is a lot more lightweight than the other. And it can be a little bit of a pain creating on a platform that you're just itching to log off to prevent your laptop from burning the house down. Now, this recording only covers what the content creation itself entails. The marketing, commerce, advertising, everything involving said products is another conversation entirely, and that warrants its own recording. So let me know if you're interested. I'll close this by restating that these, again, for the nth time now, are just my own opinions at the moment. Things do change with time. There have been moments where Second Life felt easier to work with overall, but IMVU mostly does it for me these days. Do well to let me know what your own picks look like in terms of these topics between IMVU and SL. And I'll be sure to see you in the next one.